Okay, we'll just wait a minute or two as members of the public continue to join, and perhaps Tara, you can give me the high sign when you think it slows down a little bit and we can get going.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we can get started, Director.
Perfect. Well, the bird chirping I think I was hearing is very soothing on a Friday morning. Good morning, and I want to welcome everyone. I'm Carla Namath, the Director of the California Department of Water Resources. I will be standing in today as the Commission Chair on behalf of our usual Chair, Wade Crowfoot, the Secretary for the Natural Resources Agency, and Vice Chair, Assemblyman James Gallagher, both of whom had conflicts today, and both of whom send their regrets for missing the meeting. We are back on Zoom for the 17th meeting of the Oroville Dam Citizens Advisory Commission meeting. We have 2 hours for today's meeting, and we will aim to conclude around noon. It was great to see everyone in person for our meeting in March. But we are going to hold our next meeting on Zoom also, and that really is in keeping with the governor's call to curtail travel and expenses given our current budget forecast for the state. We do have a full agenda, but I want to begin with some important housekeeping items. First, this meeting is being recorded and a video will be posted to the Commission website. And before we begin, we will have Tara Alpaugh from Kearns and West do our quick roll call of commissioners. So over to you, Tara.
Thank you, Director. Good morning, everyone. When I call your name, please indicate you are present. If you're stepping in for someone else on my list, please state your name clearly for the record. California Natural Resources Agency, Secretary Crowfoot. Department of Water Resources, Director Namath.
Present.
Assembly Member Gallagher's designee, Julie Cordy.
Yes, I'm here.
Senator Dolly's designee.
Good morning. This is Bruce Ross from Senator Dolly's office. I'm here.
Thank you, Bruce. Department of the Office of Emergency Services, Director Ward's designee, Deputy Director Najura. Department of Parks and Recreation, Director Quintero's designee, Director Superintendent Teague.
Here.
California Highway Patrol, Commander's designee, Sergeant McNabb. I see Sergeant McNabb and I heard him earlier, but I know he may be having trouble with audio, so I'm going to mark him as present. City of Oroville, Mayor Pittman.
Present.
City of Oroville, Vice Mayor Smith. Butte County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Conley. Supervisor Conley, if you're indicating you're present.
Present.
Thank you. Butte County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Kimmelshoe.
Present.
Butte County Board of Supervisors appointee, Commissioner Bateman.
Present.
Butte County Sheriff's Office, Sergeant Evans. Sutter County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Conan. Sutter County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor McKelly. Sutter County Sheriff's Office, Deputy Lycan. Yuba County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Furr. Yuba County Board of Supervisors appointee, OES Manager Marin.
Present.
Yuba County Sheriff's Office, Captain Liebarger.
Present.
Thank you, everyone. We have reached quorum with 11 commissioners present.
Thank you, Tara. Before we dive into the presentations for today, I did want to take a few moments to acknowledge the Thompson fire over the 4th of July holiday weekend. It did force many Oroville residents to evacuate. That fire also destroyed 26 structures and damaged 8 others, all according to information from our colleagues at CAL FIRE. We are grateful that no lives were lost. As you know, in all likelihood, as the fire was spreading, the Department of Water Resources temporarily shut down the Hyatt power plant and the Oroville Thermalito complex operations. I also want to express our support for our colleagues in Butte County. You all have our full support as you continue to work to contain the park fire. This fire started on July 24th and has now burned nearly 400,000 acres and threatened the communities of Cohasset and Forest Ranch. We're doing everything we can to support you and just appreciate your dedication, and we wish for everyone's safety as this wildfire comes into containment. I also want to express my gratitude towards Oroville Mayor Pittman for his leadership during the Thompson fire. I'm going to ask him to share any thoughts on that. And then I'll open the floor to other commissioners to share their reflections about wildfire, emergency response, and impacts to the community. So with that, I would invite Mayor Pittman to share his thoughts. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Director. I appreciate the opportunity. As I was in the evacuation area myself, and the lovebirds that you hear in the background are very happy to be home and safe. So we had to evacuate most of the animals, and that I think the big message here is folks that did their preparations of defensible space around their properties really paid off huge benefits. I can tell you dozens of homes that had done that. And it didn't prevent the fire from approaching their homes, but it gave the firefighters the opportunity to pick up the fire and not have to deal with a high fuel load. So again, I just want to repeat that the defensible space tactics used by everyone in California are a valuable commitment and investment to your own properties. Of course, we want to thank all the agencies that were here locally and that came from afar all over the state of California under the Master Mutual Aid system. I retired from that system, and it worked very well, as all of California has to rely on all of California. So we were a huge benefit of that fact. It just became the conditions all kind of came in alignment between weather, fuel load, and the time of the day. The burning index is extreme right now, as we're seeing with the park fire. So I just want to throw the message out there. Please, defensible space around your properties really is a huge investment to your properties.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to open the floor to any other commissioners who want to address this topic of wildfire emergencies and community impacts. Tara, can I just confirm that you also are not seeing any hands raised by commissioners?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so we will move on to our agenda. And our agenda today also reflects input from our commissioners. It's very important to ensuring that the presentations cover topics of the most interest and importance to you all and members of the public. Thank you for your contributions to the public forum. It's been almost 5 years, and I really do continue to be impressed with the caliber of the discussions and the level of engagement that we're having through the commission. Today we have 3 main presentations and a short update from the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency representative, Chris Fritz, on the inundation mapping. our summer meeting is traditionally when we receive the annual dam safety project update. So we will have that presentation today, and it will provide an update to several projects and studies that the commission has expressed interest in. Continuing our focus on risk, safety, and operations, we will also receive a briefing from Joel Wortley, who's with HDR, one of the members from the audit panel that conducted our recent Oroville Dam Safety Program audit. This independent audit is a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission 5-year requirement. Then we will have Sharon Tapia provide an overview of the role of the Division of Safety of Dams and how they provide oversight here in Oroville. I wanted to note that during the meeting number 7 in May of 2021, so we really do track the topics that we've covered and the need for ongoing input and report back. At that meeting, David Sarkeesian gave an overview of the dam safety program, and he mentioned this audit program. At that same meeting, Sharon Tapia presented on the Division of Safety of Dams. So it's important for us as commissioners to revisit topics and receive updates on these programs and projects, especially as those efforts evolve. As always, a portion of the meeting will be reserved for public comment, and each speaker will have 3 minutes to ask questions and provide comments. Before we move forward, though, I would like to take advantage of this opportunity to introduce our new Deputy Director of the State Water Project, John Yarborough. He is a familiar face to you all, so I will let John introduce himself. But in this new role, he oversees a workforce of more than 2,000 employees who are responsible for the design, construction, maintenance, and operation of the State Water Project. John has 25 years of experience with the Department of Water Resources in different divisions and offices within the State Water Project. And prior to his current role, he was the Assistant Deputy Director. John is not new to this commission and our meetings, as he has presented numerous times on the department's activities. So John, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself in this new role.
Well, thank you, Director, and good morning, Commissioners. It's great to see you all here. As the Director noted, I've been a part of this commission since we started back in September of 2019, and I got to say that getting to work with this commission's really given me a firsthand appreciation of the importance of the work that we're all trying to do here. It really has helped me understand better the perspectives of this community and what the interests and concerns are, and that's been really valuable for me. I think we have a lot of work to do to continue to develop that understanding of our perspectives. But as I look back, I reflect on how far we've come since where we were back in 2019. In my new role as the Deputy Director for the State Water Project, I am the one responsible for overseeing the operation and maintenance of the Oroville facilities. And I want to share that my first priority is ensuring the safety of the community and that the facilities that we have are maintained and operated to the highest standards. And as I move into this role as the deputy and really moving out of the role I had with this commission, want to share that I've asked David Gordon, who a lot of you have worked with before, to really take over the regular interaction with the commission. And so David will be available for commissioners as you have questions, and I'll continue to work with David to make sure we have a good transition there. One topic that I wanted to touch on that's really forefront of my mind here, and we've talked a lot about with this commission, is the Army Corps of Engineers, their update of the Water Control Manual. And so last fall, we had Jenny Fromm from the Army Corps provided an update of that process. And I just want to share where my knowledge is. So the Army Corps, middle of that process, it's multi-year process. It's going to allow entities like the department, other government agencies, but also members of the public to comment and participate and provide input on that process. And so what our understanding is the Army Corps is going to be scheduling a public meeting in the coming months. And so this will be an opportunity for the department, but also members of the public to participate and to start to engage in that process. And so we look forward to that process getting moving. over here in the next few months. Thank you all very much. And again, looking forward to continuing to work with you all. Director Namath, back to you.
Thanks, John. And I do want to just add just yet another point of clarification on the water control manual, since I know it is just really important to the commissioners and to the public. The Army Corps of Engineers, because it is their document, they are responsible for their public input process. And to the extent that the commission can help people understand those opportunities and kind of amplify the Corps' communication and engaging with the public, we will go ahead and do that. The commission itself will not be taking a position on the water control manual update. But again, this is a commission that is representing diverse points of view. We will have Jenny Fromm back here at the next meeting to update us as commissioners on the water control manual process. And I presume Ms. Fromm will also be able to update us on the public input process itself and the kind of feedback that the Corps is receiving from the public. I do appreciate very much the ways in which our commissioners are helping to lead this forum. And during meeting 16, commissioners requested several small group meetings with the Department of Water Resources to delve deeper into risk assessment and project prioritization process, and to better understand flood management related to the Oroville facility and downstream infrastructure as they prepare to engage with the Corps and the Corps' process to update that control manual. I am pleased to report that both meetings did take place between our last meeting and this meeting. And Commissioner Bateman took the time to document his conclusions, his remaining questions, and suggestions for the department in a memo. That memo was shared with commission members in advance of this meeting. It's also posted publicly on the commission website. And I'll note that the department's summaries of both meetings are also on the commission website. But I would like to take this moment to invite Commissioner Bateman to share more with the commission. So Commissioner Bateman, over to you.
Okay. Good morning. I just got a few words to say on both the flood meetings, which were very valuable, and on the water control manual. We learned a lot from the meetings, and one of the most important things was that the emergency spillway won't be used until the erodibility studies are completed and show that it's safe. I guess that means the gates are a pretty important factor in the renovation of the dam. We're not received answers from the DWR on recent questions regarding relating to the 1997 flood. It seems to us that this event and the details about it are critical information for the water control manual. Forecasting for 1997 and other past floods, forecasting snowmelt and its exclusion from the wetness index has been a major cause of miscalculation in the inflows, and I hope that'll get looked after in the new water control manual. The one thing that's left out of the which needs to be considered further is the status of the Oroville levee. The Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency is currently working with the city of Oroville in developing a project to assess the levee, so it is known what renovation, if any, is needed. Who is going to be responsible for this, and are we sure that it won't continue to be an orphan levee? And should it be included in the state plan for levies? Maybe this could be put on the action item, because and Mayor Pittman may wish to comment on that. Turning to the water control annual, we were told last week that they were going to hold a stakeholders meeting, probably in Yuba City, in the next couple of months, and this will focus solely on safety, as I understand it, and be held before the alternatives are finalized for the NEPA review. This review is when other considerations such as recreation and fisheries will be taken into account. If anyone would like to help working with us on the water control manual, could they let Bill Connolly's office know? The US Corps replied in detail to questions we submitted 6 months ago. We're now in the process of preparing further questions and clarifying our objectives, or what we see them from the point of view of downstream communities. We're submitting those in the Corps in the next 10 days, and we welcome any assistance from any supervisors or any commissioners or concerned citizens about what we should be saying. We consider that the most important things, among the most important things, are the capacity of the Yuba Feather flood pools before the storm's arrival. A key point here is the inclusion of an estimate of snow melt in the wetness index. Snow melt contributed to perhaps a 25% error in forecasting of the inflows in 2017. And we're also interested to know whether there'll be rules for early releases before the flood pool is impinged. And will the margin of safety in the forecast inflows be interpreted on the side of safety? So studies suggest that forecasting errors of over 30% are not uncommon. And another thing is whether the downstream levees are properly certified for the anticipated duration and the proposed maximum floods and the proposed rate of down ramping. The levees failed in 3 of the 4 major floods in the last 60 years. Now, a final question, which I gather the director has answered in a way, but are not, I think, in a very satisfactory way or complete way, is whether the commission should be, or what role should this commission be expected to play in the water control manual revision process? If you look at the Folsom Dam water control manual revision, the local communities must have been properly represented, and it's a very comprehensive document. So far, there is not much sign of this happening, and I don't think it should be left to a group of unfunded and concerned citizens to represent the whole community. So please let us know if anyone is interested in helping. But I think my view, the commission should maintain an oversight of what's going on in the commission on the water control manual. It's consistent with the charter, which states the commission will act as a unifying voice from the communities surrounding the Oroville Dam to provide public feedback to the dam operator. And if the commission has an oversight role, that will we are powerless. We take what we're given. But if the commission is there, then if there are disagreements, which I hope there aren't, with the way the manuals develop it, with what the DWR should think should happen, then we'll be in a position at least to have some leverage in development of the proposals. Anyhow, that's a view which we've discussed and we think the commission should have oversight. But that's what I've got to say. Thanks very much, and thanks for the cooperation of the DWR in providing us information which was not available in the past. At least it may have been publicly available, but wasn't something we were expected to think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Bateman. I would like to open the floor to any other commissioners that have an update on this topic or any other topics. Supervisor Connolly. Whoops.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Supervisor Connolly, I see your hand.
Yeah.
Okay. First off, I concur with the conclusion that Mr. Bateman came to. Him and Matt Minanek worked really hard to try to put a more scientific slant on our concerns. But I am troubled by the logic of not taking part in the formation of our new water control manual. I don't understand why we shouldn't be part of that, and or DWR should be into it, because you're the mechanic that runs the dam. And if they're making the rules by which you run it, you should have input. And of course, our priority is always going to be safety. The other thing is the orphan levy, and the mayor doesn't have it. Nobody knows who owns the levy, actually, as far as I know, and that needs to be resolved so that we can look to funding to secure the safety of the residents in downtown Oroville and even the communities below us. If the levee blows out, it's going to cause long range deep flooding, and so that needs to be resolved. And I would like to say this one last thing. Things are better. Our communication under you is much better, Carla, than it has been. But we do have important input, and I hope you continue to urge your staff to take this seriously. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Supervisor Connolly. And I wanted, if I wasn't clear before, and I probably wasn't, I would definitely urge commissioners to provide input to the core process. The Department of Water Resources has already been providing input. We will be providing more input to the core, and all of that will be transparent. How the department is engaging with the core in this process, and once the core is I think a little bit more engaged and has a little bit more public process behind them, if you will, it's our expectation that the core, as participants in this commission, will be able to report out on the public input they've received. It will be an opportunity for the core to update us on how they work through that public input. Commissioner Bateman, I just want to acknowledge your comment about oversight. What I would like to say is, all of our commissioners representing diverse interests, I think, very much need to do everything we can to provide that input to the core. I would assume the federal government has views about our commission having oversight over a federal agency, but I want to acknowledge the sentiment that you're bringing to the table, that this commission and the interests that we represent need to do as much as we can in as organized a way as we can to bring the science and our concerns to the table through the core's process. And I am confident that we can work with the core to make sure that those concerns are addressed. Mayor Pittman, I think your hand was up next.
Yes, thank you very much. And I appreciate Mr. Bateman's efforts. He's done a wonderful job with so much information, and Supervisor Bill Conley. I just wanted to touch base on the comment, the orphan levy. That's a pretty good description. And I don't want to add anything to Mr. Fritz's presentation later on, but I want you all to have a picture that the levee was put there in 1913, and it literally was a 4-inch slab of concrete poured on the slope. And that's all we know about what protects the downtown core of Oroville. And then in the 1930s, the gold dredging added more rock cobble and ballast on top of that concrete slab that was poured. So we really don't know what a levee is, and Supervisor Conley is correct. We have a great misunderstanding of what's there and what isn't there. But it is something that Oroville hasn't really addressed. And then when we look at the south of Orodam Boulevard area, which was annexed to the city in the late 70s, that was mostly all rock cobble from the gold dredging operations. And there was never a master drainage plan ever put in place. And we're finding now, with working with Salutco, that we really need to have a master drainage plan for that entire area to protect our commercial section of the community. And that's a huge need, because everybody just figured the French drain was good enough. But now in today's world, that's just not going to be adequate for it. So I look forward to the presentation later on, and I just want y'all to have a picture about our levee is really, really old and literally was put together with horse and buggy wagons and hand poured concrete on a slope. And it only shows in a couple places down by Bedrock Park, but it's very, very old concrete, and we have no idea how it was made other than we can see portions of it. So that's what we're working with. And I just want to add too, we have some infrastructure in that levee that's really critical to the fiber optic cable system. So we have a couple things beyond just the city of Oroville protection. And we look forward to Sabuco's presentation later on. Thank you very much for allowing the comment. I just wanted to all have a picture about our levee, which isn't really a levee. It's just a poured slab of concrete. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Vice Mayor Smith.
Turn your speaker on.
Vice Mayor Smith, you're muted currently. Please unmute yourself.
There you go.
There we go.
He's unmuted, but I still can't hear him.
Vice Mayor Smith, we still can't hear you. Can I suggest maybe if you're up for it, if you want to put your comments and or questions in the chat.
Carla,
we
we don't
can-
have the chat enabled currently. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Vice Mayor Smith, you can troubleshoot your audio issues by selecting the little arrow by the microphone and selecting your microphone. And maybe when you get that troubleshot, you can come back on.
Any other commissioners have updates on this or other topics?
Can I just ask two questions? One is, how can we organize commissioners in some way? And indeed, the idea isn't, of course, that the commission should oversee the Corps. The commission should perhaps oversee its own efforts in this. And the second one is, again, who is going to be responsible for helping the mayor? Or is it all up to the Oroville City Council on the Oroville levies? I think there are some alternatives, and who is considering that?
Thank you, Commissioner Bateman. I think we will have another conversation at our subsequent meeting about the water control manual and have a discussion about the various representation on this committee and the input they're providing to the Corps. I would, so maybe Tara and James, we can make sure we get that agendized. And then Mayor Pittman, I don't know if you have a quick response to Commissioner Bateman, and then I do want to move on if we can.
Well, certainly the city is, we'll take responsibility as best we can, but we have limited resources. We're hoping Sabuco's agreement with them will help us find the solutions and then find whatever funding or revenue streams. And there may be a number of different solutions, either strengthening the existing levee or opening up the wildlife area to let the river go wider. There's a couple options there that are very possible, and we're looking forward to any of those options as solutions to the future. And where our connection with Sabuco is going to be a huge, valuable asset to the city of Oroville, and we'll all let you know for sure.
Thank you. Other commissioners, any updates before we move on? Okay, I think I am seeing none. So we're going to head into our presentations. I just, before we get there, very briefly, I want to highlight just a couple of process points. First, just a friendly reminder to commissioners that you must really carefully limit any serial communications among your fellow commissioners between meetings on topics that are under the commission's jurisdictions. Serial communications are in-person discussions, phone calls, or emails that involve fewer than a quorum of commissioners, but taken together involve a majority of members. Just a real friendly reminder, because I know we're all sitting here in part because we really like to roll up our sleeves and get some work done. So please do be extra careful about that. We do need to ensure that we are in continued compliance with the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, which is the state law that governs all state boards and commissions. That act requires that all meetings where a quorum of the body's members convene either in person, on Zoom, or serially to address issues under the body's jurisdiction, those meetings are publicly noticed. So this is intended to ensure that the public continues to have a seat at the table, and it gives the public an ability to monitor and participate in our decision-making processes. We realize this, again, this may seem like a small detail when you're sharing your thoughts with other commissioners or shooting off a quick email, but it really is critical that we continue to ensure that the public has access to the full scope of the commissioners' collective information sharing and our discussions. And then the second quick update, if we can move to the action item tracker slide. Okay, after the March meeting, you would have received an updated action item tracker that had both resolved items and new ones that emerged from meeting number 16. We're going to do the same thing after this meeting, and we will invite you to review that tracker and provide your input and suggested corrections before our next meeting together. So with all of that, that process information, it is time to begin our presentations. So first up is David Sarkeesian. He's the Department of Water Resources Chief of Dam Safety Services, and he joins us with our annual dam safety project update. So Mr. Sarkeesian, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for having me back to provide this update. So again, yeah, I'm Dave Sarkeesian. I manage our State Water Project Dam Safety Program within our Division of Operations and Maintenance. Let's go ahead and advance. I'm going to cover today some updates on the flood control outlet and tow piezometers that we installed a few years ago, our progress on our flood control outlet gated monoliths analyses, the emergency spillway erodibility study that's ongoing. And then I inadvertently missed a bullet. I've got some slides on the revised Oroville storage capacity curve as well that I'll speak to, and then close it out with an update on our 5-year Director of Safety Review Boards and FERC Part 12D safety inspections. So let's go ahead and advance. Before we get into the piezometer data, it's good to look and reflect upon kind of what's happened this water year. We've had obviously a great water year, and we've had a lot of flow through the spillway and through Hyatt, but we've also had our river valve outlet system rehabilitation project in progress, and that requires near daily outages of the Hyatt power plant. And so we've seen the spillway really get used, a lot more than often, but relatively low flows to just maintain our diversion pool, and of course flows to the Feather River. And so it's been kind of a slow and steady year. Peak inflow was only around 36,000 CFS. That was back in February. So slow and steady is nice, of course. And our peak release was around 18,000 CFS back in February. And so in terms of spillway use, quite a bit, but not really large magnitude. Let's go ahead and advance. And so this slide speaks to our piezometers that were installed in our flood control outlet, the gated monoliths that that house the gates. And in that bottom profile is kind of a cross section through those monoliths, and that green line is basically how we drilled through those piers or walls and placed piezometers at the foundation of the structure. And so we've been watching this data. I think I shared some in the past. What we're looking for is any high piezometric pressures or groundwater, on the bottom of the structure. Thus far, we have not seen that, so that is good news. We have not seen it whether it's with the lake topping out or as we're making spillway releases. The graphic or chart on the bottom right is quite busy, and so I'll just try and walk through it quickly. The reservoir elevation is in that light blue, and so you can see it, kind of ramp down and up through the year, and of course ramping up in the springtime typically. The green bars on the bottom is precipitation, and so that's kind of like I think a biweekly value of how many inches of rain. And then we have in red is actual spillway releases. So we want to see, do things react during a spillway release? And then lastly, the little dots are the actual data from the piezometers. And so you can see the majority of them are pretty quiet. That band in the middle there with the amber and some blue and some red underneath. The one piezometer we do see a little bit more reaction from is B162 in gray. And so that's kind of in the top of the figure there. That piezometer is on the far edge of one of the monoliths. And so it's where we transition from the gated spillways to another monolith. So it's a little bit different configuration. We're seeing that react to both rain, and it also stays a little bit elevated when we do have the lake up higher. But the pressures are really not of concern. But it just tells us basically there is some communication. Rainwater is getting to that piezometer, and then also when the lake is high, it's also seeing a little bit of seepage there, but nothing to the level of concern. Next slide. So here's a graphic, similar graphic that depicts the piezometers down at the toe of the dam. And so you might recall we installed these, I think it was in 2020. And we put a series of piezometers in the toe of the dam to monitor pore pressures at that location within what we call our drainage blanket. And so we've been seeing the kind of similar trending behavior with these piezometers. Again, in the graphic, we've got the reservoir elevation, we've got precipitation in green, and then you can see how these kind of ramp up and kind of ramp down. And I tried to call out the trends that I see over the past couple of years here, that of course they do become elevated when we have a lot of rain. So a lot of that rain is percolating down through the embankment and getting into our drainage blanket. And then as the rain kind of diminishes, but the lake is still rising, we're still topping out in the late spring, we're actually seeing these piezometers fall off. The pressures are dropping, groundwater's dropping. And that really tells us that this is really being driven largely by the precipitation. And so we've seen that trend in 2023, in 2024, and even, back in 2022, you can kind of see it. That was a little bit more subdued. But all this aligns with our thinking over the years at how precipitation really drives the amount of seepage we see, and it also correlates with what we see through the seepage collection weir for the dam. And so that's, all to me, all good news, confirming our understanding of really what's driving seepage for the dam. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to the flood control outlet projects. You might recall we've been working on analyses for monoliths 25 and 26, which are the gated monoliths, for a number of years. Since we last kind of talked about this topic, we've updated our model to address some of the comments we received from the Division of Safety of Dams. We've also incorporated the pore pressure data that I had on an earlier slide from those piezometers to reflect really what we're experiencing there rather than overly conservative assumptions. What we've seen in our reanalyses is slightly better performance under seismic loading, so a potential for less retrofits. And we are packaging up that analysis and anticipating a submittal to both FERC and DSOD, hopefully in the coming weeks. Another document that we'll be updating is what we call our retrofit design criteria document, and that's kind of charting the groundwork or laying down the criteria we anticipate to use when we get to that point to start designing retrofits. And so getting some concurrence from our regulators early on that criteria is really helpful to move things along. We also reanalyzed the bridge, and that fortunately meets a performance standard for no collapse for a 10,000-year seismic event. And so this work is ongoing. These models are very robust, and We get a lot of great feedback from our regulators to fine tune things and revisit the modeling and the performance. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is intended to kind of chart kind of the road map, so to speak, of kind of how we see this unfolding. The past couple of years, as you might recall, we were working on these nonlinear analyses, sophisticated modeling, submitted results to DSOD and FERC. Let's go ahead and advance. And so in this time frame, as I mentioned, we're incorporating that piezometer data into the modeling. We're also planning to take a quantitative risk analysis look at these monoliths so that we can really focus in on the potential failure modes specific to these monoliths and understand the baseline risk at a greater detail than what was done back in 2020 with the level 2 risk analysis. And that's really going to help us build the case and understand what kind of investment we need to make and how we're going to hopefully efficiently and effectively reduce risk for the structure. We'll also look at the variations of risk treatments in this time frame. Let's advance again. And so like we've had in the past, we kind of see these two possible outcomes. And this is out when we've got hopefully this work completed, we've got the information in our hands to make a really well-informed decision. We see path 1, if it's feasible to retrofit and the risk reduction achieved by retrofits look appropriate, then we'd initiate a design effort and permitting effort to get that done. Or if the retrofits don't look feasible, because you might recall the piers have anchors in them for the radial gates. It's a very complex structure, and we got to be really mindful of how invasive we are with retrofits. And so if it just doesn't look feasible or the risk reduction is insufficient, that's when we start looking at some of those big items that we saw come out of the comprehensive needs assessment, like a new FCO headwork structure or other new piece of infrastructure. And so I still think we're on that upper path there where we'll find some good solutions to retrofit the existing structure. But we just wanted to kind of outline the time frame where we see this heading. And then in the meanwhile, we do have other projects, one of which is the radial gate hoist maintenance project, you might recall, that we were working on. There's a number of other efforts on the FCO. In the case of that project, this year, we aren't necessarily getting a new hoist replaced out there due to the hydrology, the need to operate the spillway to support the RVOS rehabilitation project. And so that activity isn't necessarily happening this year, but it's still a project that's ongoing, and of course a multi-year project considering the structure needs to remain in service. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on to the emergency spillway erodibility study. We had a number of kind of tasks or subtasks for this project, one of which was to update the geologic model, so that's completed. We also completed the hydraulic modeling of splitting of flows between the flood control outlet, meaning the gated spillway, and the emergency spillway. And that was done to make sure that each facility is really kind of independent of each other in terms of passing flow, because they're right next to each other. And so that was a question we needed to answer. So we've confirmed that they're independent of one another. We also verified the emergency spillway capacity. And then now we're really moving into the heart of the erodibility study, having these preliminary or early tasks accomplished. Right now, we're in the midst of analyzing the 2017 incident, using that the erodibility or erosion that was experienced there to establish erodibility parameters for the different types of rock underneath the emergency spillway. And so that's kind of unique. Most owners, fortunately, don't have events where they've got this kind of information. In our case, we do. So we're going to use it. We're going to leverage it to really calibrate how we model the rock materials for this emergency spillway erodibility study. We've also got a 3D hydraulic modeling effort ongoing to support the study. And of course, the model development of the actual scour model is ongoing. So we see this work completing in 2025. I suspect maybe this time next year, I'll have some information to share. And also, just like the gated monoliths, once we have this information, we plan on taking it to a quantitative risk analysis where we really dig into the actual scenarios for the emergency spillway and really get our arms around the existing risk And that again would guide decision-making, build the case for any action to make further improvements to the emergency spillway. Next slide, please. As part of this study, we're looking at 5 scenarios, meaning hydraulic flows over the spillway. And we're going to use outflow hydrographs rather than just a constant flow. And most of these types of studies use just a constant flow because it's just a lot easier modeling wise. But that's a little bit conservative, right? Because these storms don't last forever. They have a rising limb, a peak, and a falling limb. And so that's what we're going to do here. We've got a number of scenarios, and you can see that they're tied to return periods so that we can take this information, into that risk workshop and understand the frequency of these types of events and the damage, to the spillway or hillside that might be experienced under these flows. We'll take it up to the probable maximum flood. And then we're also going to take a look at the arc storm, one of the arc storm scenarios. And you might recall that's a much longer storm, but has a lower peak. But that may lead to a different performance for the emergency spillway. And so we want to look into that and make sure we've got that kind of storm captured and have an understanding of its performance under that longer but less intense flow. Next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, this is the item that I neglected to put in that other slide. We have just recently revised our reservoir storage capacity curve. And just so for some context, the original survey was back in 1965. The first sediment survey thereafter was in 71. And then in the 90s and 2000s, we did some sediment surveys, and those were done at the cross sections in this aerial view here with the lettering. So you can see there's, I think, 20-something locations where they go out in a boat and either use bathymetry or even drop a weighted tape to tag the bottom of the lake and just get some generalized information at these specific locations. And then we've had a number of remotely operated vehicle inspections over time. One for the river valve outlet system, the actual intake tunnel, and then at the Palermo intake. Both of those are located right there by the dam, and those gave us isolated visual assessments of sediment. We'd see maybe 18 inches, 24 inches at these locations. But we realized that we've got 50 years of operation. We all know sedimentation is inevitable. We've had the burned watershed conditions, so a lot of questions about, is that going to really accelerate sedimentation over time? In order to assess that, we need an accurate baseline. And then with the water control manual update coming and forecast informed decision-making, all these things that we've been talking about, having this information is really critical to be fundamental input to both the water control manual, that we have an understanding of what is the current capacity of the lake, and then also for all the dam safety studies that my group does, that we want to have accurate information. And of course, the capacity of the lake is just fundamental. And so we should have that current value rather than something from the 1960s. Next slide, please.
David, can you give me a second? I'm going to turn off the timings of your slides. They keep
Sure.
advancing themselves.
So that effort, I think the next slide might speak to it. We started in 2022. We used a high resolution multi-beam bathymetric, basically a boat, that we were lucky to get out there in 2022 when the lake was really low, because it's obviously a lot of time and labor intensive to capture that kind of data from a boat. So we did it when the lake was low. And then we also flew the lake and performed LiDAR surveys, and that's a lot more economical, captures large swaths of land and the reservoir. And then we merged those two surfaces. And so that was in 2023. That led to development of the storage capacity curve. And then as we were getting some of these deliverables, we realized this is really not only impactful to us doing studies, but it's impactful to different groups within DWR that are doing planning studies or figuring out water supply, water delivery, allocations. So we put together a communication engagement plan, and we started is kind of a phased plan where first off, let's talk internally, make sure that we've got all the groups that rely on this data, that rely on this curve, that they know it's coming, they know it's going to be published. we got that group together. We then identified the partnering agencies, who else out there relies on this information, needs to know that we're going to be revising this curve, and then also the public and interested parties. And so we kind of did a staged rollout so that we were kind of making sure that people knew it was coming, understood what we did, and that all that culminated, on July 1st when we all transitioned to the new curve. And so that was a big part of the past year, making sure that we were reaching out to people and that this information wasn't just getting, in a few hands. We want everybody to know that we've done this work and that the lake has a new capacity. And so let's advance the slide. Here is are the two curves, original in green and the new curve in red. And so just visually, not a huge difference. I think that was somewhat expected. It's we don't see huge amounts of sediment coming into the lake. And so we felt that this makes sense just based on, anecdotal observations and where we think we might land. Let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. Of course, there is some loss of storage. Some of that is sedimentation. And looking at the data, most of that is in the far fingers of the lake, below elevation 650, where it makes sense the rivers are bringing this material in and it's dropping out relatively quickly in most cases. But we also think some of the difference is just due to the coarseness of that original survey. It was basically 20-foot contours, so pretty coarse in terms of precision and accuracy, and done with 1960s methodologies, as compared to what we did with the modern technologies. The LiDAR provides a bare earth surface, and our data is in 1-foot contours. So we think there's, in some cases, just a mismatch, in technologies. And so that's basically, we've had this 3.5 million number for years and years, and now our current capacity at elevation 900, so the lake topped out, is at that 3.4 million acre feet value. And that's a reduction of roughly 112,000 acre feet, 3.2% over greater than 50 years. And so I think it kind of fits at least within where I think this would end up. And again, just great information to have as we move into these other studies, that we now have this current understanding of what we've really got behind the dam. Next slide. Okay. As many of you know, we have a 5-year Director of Safety Review Board, or a Part 12 safety inspection. The first is driven by the California Water Code, and we conduct that board with a Division of Safety of Dams. And then the Part 12D safety inspection is conducted with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. In both cases, the consultants that we contract with need to be reviewed and approved by FERC and DSOD. And we retain them through a request for qualifications, where we interviewed a number of people and wanted to make sure we're getting a diverse perspective and an independent perspective as they conduct these reviews. Back in December of 23, we conducted the Director of Safety Review Board inspection with DSOD of Oroville and the Saddle Dams. And then in January, we conducted the Part 12D, what was called the periodic inspection with FERC. And so the periodic inspection, you might recall, FERC updated their guidelines, and the periodic inspection does not have the level 2 risk analysis as compared to the comprehensive assessment, Part 12D. We received our Director of Safety Review Board reports in May and the Part 12 reports in July. And in both sets of reports, one of the main conclusions we're looking for, of course, is on the bottom there, that Oroville, Parish, and Bidwell Canyon Saddle Dams were found safe for continued use and reservoir impoundment. Next slide. Of course, we get a lot of recommendations from these boards. I just took a few here and kind of summarized them for the commission to get a flavor of what they provided. They recommended we develop and adopt universal standards and best practices for our structural deformation monitoring, meaning our surveying of monuments, to ensure consistency. They noticed that we have different survey crews perform this work at times, and getting a written policy and procedure, it would be very beneficial to make sure we're getting consistent data. Also to include details of LiDAR surveys of the dams to ensure consistency of methods and establish frequency of their performance. Adding new survey references or benchmarks at Bidwell and Parish Camp. And then repaired the Oroville Dam tow access road and drainage to prevent further damage. And so that road has seen a lot of traffic, a lot of construction traffic due to our river valve outlet system rehabilitation project. And so it's pretty beaten up. And we've already got plans in the works to have that section of road and the drainage improvements done by our contractor that's working on that project. And then lastly, conduct a wave run-up analysis for Oroville and Bidwell, which includes hydrodynamic modeling of wave generation and propagation due to landsliding. And so some of these are just changes to procedures or creating new procedures, getting them down on paper. And then some of the, the last one there is one of these studies that might take a year or two to get accomplished. Next slide. So with that, any questions if we have time?
Let's go ahead and open it up to questions before we get to our presentation from Mr. Wortley. Any commissioners with questions? Okay. Senator Dolly's office.
Yeah, hey, thank you for all this. It was very interesting to see the capacity numbers and information on sedimentation. 3% in 50 years is not bad. Some dams will sediment up. Has there ever been any kind of analysis of the effect of major fires in the watershed above Oroville on the sedimentation rates at all?
I think some work has been done there. I haven't personally reviewed it, but we could take that back and try and get that answered. One thing that we did, at least my program did, was take a look at woody debris. And so we did some modeling to try and assess the amount of woody debris we get. Of course, we've got crews on the lake collecting it, and now we're working to quantify it. Like, what do we collect every year? We haven't seen a lot, as you might know, even though we've had a burned watershed. I think that's because we haven't had really extreme inflows. And that's kind of what the modeling told us. And also I think what experiences told us is we got to really have, a 97 event, large inflows to pick up a lot of the debris, mobilize it and get it into the lake. And so I can take that question back, and ask my colleagues about, any sedimentation studies.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Other commissioners? Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands. Thank you, David. I do want to invite Joel Wortley to join us. He's from the consulting firm HDR, and he's going to give us a report on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's required 5-year owner dam safety program audit. So this is an independent audit, and Mr. Wortley is going to present it to the commission. Mr. Wortley.
Thank you very much for the introduction. If we could bring up the slides, there we go. And maybe we'll jump right in and introduce the panel on the next slide. So the panel is, as mentioned, an external independent group. And so these are my colleagues, Alex Grenoble, Lee Wooten, and myself, Joel Wortley. Alex and I are from HDR and Lee is from GEI. We all happen to be geotechnical engineers. Alex and Lee have more of a technical background, having spent decades analyzing dams and dam safety. Myself, having started my career in technical dam safety, and then moved more into the administration and management of the dam safety programs. And so together, our task was to review the dam safety program. We'll talk a bit about the scope of that program on the next slide. Oh, sorry, the agenda first. So we're going to talk about purpose, scope, and schedule of the audit, and findings in terms of program strengths, and then running through some opportunities and recommendations that were identified, and finally the audit conclusions. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the audit is mandated by FERC. Under Title 18, there is a requirement to have an independent audit every 5 years. And the scope of said audit is really a broad scope of the owner's dam safety program. And so in this regard, we had about 556 documents made available to us to review, some of which were very, very deep. And so we didn't necessarily go through them all in detail. We visited all of the field divisions with dams, and we interviewed 24 interviews with staff. And so you can see in the bottom right-hand photo there, the team out visiting one of the sites, in this case, Del Val. And we conducted that work between March and September of 23. Next slide, please. So with respect to program strengths, and this is not an exhaustive list, and I should maybe note that this is not an exhaustive presentation. This is the abridged version, and so you're getting the high-level summary and not all the details. But into a sampling of the strengths, we have the program development and dam safety program document. So the program has really come a long way in the last 5 years since the Oroville incident, and is now quite a strong program, as demonstrated by its dam safety program document, which is pictured in the bottom left there. And this is the submission to FERC annually, and is noted to meet, or we found it to meet and rather exceed FERC expectations. So definitely a strength of the program there. Another strength is the organization and communication of the program, and particularly the Chief Dam Safety Engineer. Communication works well within the program between the Chief Dam Safety Engineer, its steering committee, and the executive. And the Dam Safety Engineer himself is a strong champion and strong leader and champion for the program. With respect to the program administration and field deployment, we did find that the program is capably administered by the Dam Safety Services branch with well-defined procedures and strong documentation to foster consistency, and that the field deployment is effective. And you can see in the top photo there, some representations of the field, or representatives of the field division out with us on site, and they clearly have an ownership, they're engaged in their dams, and they're familiar with them, which is great to see. When it comes to surveillance and monitoring, that's another strength of the program. There are plans and reports compiled for all dams annually, and they definitely meet or exceed expectations. And there's also a leveraging of technology that's occurring. You can see the bottom right photos and video surveillance here from Oroville. Training and development is another strength. It's made a priority for staff, and they have ready access to quality training materials. Again, good to see. And risk-informed decision-making is another program strength, with increased use over the last number of years, which helps understand the dam safety risks and obviously informed decisions around priorities, budgets, and schedules. And so that's just a quick touch on some strengths, and then we'll jump into more of the focus of the audit, which of course, being an audit, is the opportunities for improvement. Next slide, please. So we're going to cover these in 7 groupings or topics. The first being dam safety policy, objectives, and expectations. Next, dam safety organization responsibilities, training program, communications, coordination, reporting and reports, record keeping and databases, succession planning, and continuous improvement. And on the right there, you just see a couple of examples of the documentation we had access to in terms of a training program directive and the annual program report, which is an internal document that enhances communication. Next slide, please. So opportunities and recommendations. So first, in the category of dam safety policy objectives and expectations, we have the dam safety policy pictured top left. And so the dam safety policy itself certainly met expectations and was fit for purpose. The opportunity we found there is that there's a lot of development at the State Water Project right now, and the policy needs to be kept up. And so there's an opportunity there when needed to make sure that that policy gets updated. Second, we have employee dam safety communication. And so FERC expectation here is that, as noted in the bottom there, that the highest person in the organization should issue a signed company dam safety philosophy to the employees. And what we found is that this there's a bit of a gap here, and that this is really the only non-conformance that we found, which is that this needed to be picked up a little bit. And so the recommendation here to correct this non-conformance was for the director to annually issue a signed dam safety philosophy to employees. Next slide, please. With respect to the dam safety organization and responsibilities, we found that dam safety responsibilities were quite well defined, and you can see in the top graphic here how the communication works around the program, moving through the Chief Dam Safety Engineer to the steering committee and up to the executive. That was well documented in terms of roles and responsibilities. What was less clear was the accountabilities around the actual safety of the dams and where those particular accountabilities would settle and ultimate decision authority would lie. And so the recommendation there was to document exactly that. Next, with respect to dam safety services ancillary responsibilities, we found that it wasn't entirely clear where the program's responsibilities ended with respect to canals, aqueducts, and pipelines, which are adjacent to the dams. And so the response or the recommendation here was to tune that up a bit. The program is well resourced, as you can see in the org chart there in the bottom left. I think something about 27 positions, but there's still limits to what they can do. And so it needed to be clear which of those other structures were in their purview. Next, we have dam safety and asset management. So asset management is a growing focus for the State Water Project. And what you see there on the right, bottom right, is their strategic asset management plan. So they're growing a lot of capability. And the recommendation here, or the concern here, was that be ensured that the primacy of dam safety be maintained as these other programs were being rolled out. With respect to the dam safety program, training program, minor issue here, which was that we found that staff were generally, or were not just generally, but were qualified to do their jobs, but that administratively there was an opportunity to track those qualifications to be able to demonstrate that minimum training requirements had been met. So just a question of documentation to demonstrate diligence. Next slide, please. So when it comes to communications, coordination, reporting, and reports, with respect to program metrics, we found that the reporting was on point with respect to what was being accomplished, but there was an opportunity to put it in context of requirements. So not just reporting how many of whatever got accomplished in a given year, but how many needed to be accomplished. So either demonstrate that minimums were being met or exceeded. And that by doing so, it would facilitate a scorecard view of the performance of the program, which obviously enhances reporting. With respect to interconnection and shared learnings, like any large organization, the State Water Project is susceptible to siloing and communication can break down. And so as you can see, there's some definite positives here. In the bottom left photo there, you can see a system map that we saw on a field division wall at one of the offices. And so that's great in terms of giving or communicating a global or a system priority to staff rather than a local priority. And the recommendation here was to continue to promote interconnection and shared learnings between field division staff and to foster connection between staff, particularly new staff, so that they can benefit from each other's experience. Next, with respect to high-level water monitoring, in the top photo there, we see the Bethany Reservoir and a staff gauge used to confirm water level readings. And early detection of a water problem is clearly and obviously important, particularly in the canal system where there's lots of water moving around and potentially limited freeboard. And we did see that there are high-level monitors in place, that there's automated warnings and alarms in the control rooms. What wasn't clear was just how effective that was. And so the recommendation was for the State Water Project to evaluate that effectiveness and upgrade if needed. Next, we have notification timeliness. So threshold exceedances, when it comes to instrumentation, are a key part to ensuring dam safety. In the bottom right there, you can see an example of a threshold exceedance action plan. And one of these is written every time an exceedance occurs or a limit is exceeded on an instrumentation reading. And what we found is that the timeliness with respect to these action plans being developed and issued wasn't always meeting expectations. And so the recommendation was to start tracking that timeliness and ensuring that any non-conformances were corrected. Again, with respect to instrumentation, in this case, performance-based thresholds, we did see that there were a lot of threshold exceedances triggered by the practice of using performance-based thresholds, and that there was the opportunity to do some work here and use performance-based thresholds where it made sense, but go to a different system or more of a trigger system where it didn't, and thereby reduce the number of false positives and take some of the effort out of writing threshold exceedance action plans where it wasn't necessary. Next slide, please. Moving on to records keeping and databases. We did see that a new number of instruments were read manually, and that data was transmitted via email for entry into a spreadsheet, and that creates the opportunity for transcription errors or can lead to a problem with data quality. And so the recommendation here was to review the quality assurance processes and make sure that they were fit for purpose, and to leverage technology where it made sense. In the top left of the graphic there, we see a surveillance and monitoring report. And one of these is issued annually, and this one's for the Oroville Dam. It's over 700 pages long. And so that's just a lot of information and a lot of work to pull that all together. So there's opportunity to leverage technology to take some of the effort out of that. Some of which has been done. You can see in the bottom left, we have the Dam Safety Information Tracker. And so that's a piece of home-built technology that is helping keep things organized. We do see that there's more opportunity there, particularly where things get complicated. And in the top right photo there, you see the Pyramid Dam. It's got very complex geology, as is being explained to us in the bottom right-hand photo. And so keeping all that organized and staying on top of it is a challenge. Next, we have construction closeout documentation. A bit of a gap identified here where the submission of closeout documentation was lagging. And so staff didn't always have up-to-date operating manuals or maintenance instructions to go with new builds or upgrades. And so the recommendation is to close that gap and make sure that the closeout documentation is arriving in a timely way. Moving on to succession planning. This is one of the bigger risks or bigger problems, challenges that we identified within the program. And so the observation is that attraction and retention of qualified staff is a challenge for the program, and staff churn is occurring at all levels. And so when those people come and go, they walk out the door with their institutional knowledge, with their experience, and that detracts from the program. As we talked about, getting your head around what's happening at Pyramid with complex geology or with these 700 pages of monitoring and instrument or surveillance and monitoring reporting. You need to have the experience, you need to have the time with those things to develop the judgment. And so staff sustainability is a challenge. And the recommendation would be to look for ways to mitigate those risks and enhance retention. Next slide, please. So with respect to continuous improvement, and we say that the program does very well in challenging itself and driving improvement, we did identify a few other opportunities. And so first here, we have the quality management system. You can see in the top left, this is the signature page from one of the reports. And you can see 2 engineer seals on there, layers of review, approval, and signatures. And so those are the types of quality management processes you want to see, and we do see. What we didn't see was a more formal quality management system that would ensure that these practices were being used more broadly and more consistently. With respect to portfolio view of dam safety risk, good progress being made around risk-informed decision-making and evaluating potential failure modes. The opportunity here would be to to roll those up into a portfolio view, which aggregates those individual risks, gives more context to them, and promotes or facilitates risk communication internally and externally. With respect to coordinating with asset management, as shown in the bottom right, dam safety lives sort of at this overlap between managing the assets, managing the risks, and managing the data that informs all of the above. And we see that there is a lot of development work ongoing right now with the State Water Project around asset management. And so staying up with that, being part of that is key to dam safety. Operational performance planning and review. The program, again, is strong. It does a good job of challenging itself for continuous improvement. The next step to that would be to develop a regular planning and review cycle where performance objectives are set and monitored, and the robustness of the system is tested. Much like with dam safety, you look for potential failure modes. This would be an opportunity for the program to look for where its weaknesses might be. Next, with respect to assessments and audits, So there's two levels of assessment and audit underway that we looked at. The first was the previous independent audit done 5 years ago. And we found that there the recommendations had largely been implemented or addressed, and anything left open really was either encompassed or superseded by this audit. So nothing trailing there. And there's also a self-assessment program underway where the State Water Project uses CIADI's Dam Safety Maturity Matrix to assess themselves, which we found was a healthy and productive means of identifying areas for improvement, and was good for communication and spreading experience. So with respect to assessments and audits, the panel had no other recommendations than what is already included in the report. Next slide, please. So audit conclusions. So there are definitely, the program's come a long way, it's doing well. There are ongoing challenges, and the first of which we'll highlight here is just organizational change. Aging infrastructure is driving a lot of change and a push towards asset management within the organization. As commented, that overlaps with risk management and data management and several of the underlying processes that build up and become the dam safety program and effective dam safety. And so it's going to be an ongoing challenge for the program to make sure that they are not only keeping up with those changes, but leveraging them to the betterment of the program. So they need to be there at the table and have a strong voice in ensuring that dam safety is kept informed and kept involved. Staffing and succession, as we've already talked about, these are key to the dam safety program, and definitely some of the bigger challenges we've identified in the audit. Technology helps, but at the end of the day, dam safety is reliant on people and judgment. And with turnover and loss of staff, that loss of institutional knowledge can make it hard to maintain that critical mass of experience and judgment. And I'm sure we all know hiring these days is very challenging. So those skills and experience are hard to come by. They're in short supply. You can't just hire people who will line up and look for an opportunity with you. And even the one you do, it takes time for them to get to know the facilities and to build the experience and familiarity to have good judgment when it comes to complex issues. And that's true of the engineers and the technical staff, but also true of the field staff who are out there, boots on the ground, reading the instruments, doing the daily surveillance. They're the first line of defense. They're the ones who are going to notice when something is awry, and they need that time to get to know their structures and to build that experience as well. And so a real ongoing challenge here with respect to staffing in the form of attracting and retaining qualified people, to which mitigating succession risk with existing staff is of prime importance. With respect to the current state of the program has made big strides over the last 5 years. It's appropriate, it has an appropriate organizational emphasis on dam safety, the State Water Project has an appropriate organizational emphasis on dam safety. The program is adequately resourced. Senior management have an appreciation for dam safety risks, and staff understand their dam safety responsibilities. So in that respect, things look pretty good. No surprise, and as expected, the audit did identify a number of opportunities for improvement, and we've just run through many of them where the program could be run more effectively or more efficiently, both of which promote better dam safety, and that the more efficient you are, the more resources you've got to do more things with. And the sharper your tools are, the more effective you can be in actually in discerning what are real risks from distractions. We did find that the program meets BERC expectations, with the one exception, non-conformance regarding the annual dam safety communication to staff, and that it does compare favorably to industry practice and other dam safety programs we've been exposed to. And with that, I'll thank you and ask if there are any questions.
Thank you, Joel. I'd like to open it up to commissioners for questions.
I have a question. It's Robert Bateman. Did you look at the accuracy of the flow measurements, like in the river gauges and even across the gated spillway?
The MCT program audit is really an administrative audit looking at the processes and an organization of the program. So that level of technical detail would have fallen outside of our scope.
Thank you.
The Vice Mayor has his hand up.
Vice Mayor Smith?
Can you hear me now? Great. I apologize. Partly why I didn't count myself as present. I was having obviously some computer difficulties. Appreciate the presentation, and this also provides me an opportunity to kind of circle back to my original comments to Mr. Bateman's concerns about the orphan levy, which sitting on City Council, and when Supervisor Connolly and Sabuka came into a City Council meeting, it's been maybe about 2 years ago, maybe not quite that long, and presented to us for the first time the revelation that we have this orphan levy. Now, I kind of consider myself an outsider because I grew up in the Bay Area, and just looking at Project 2100 from the dam all the way through the Thermalito complex to the outlet, and including the misnomered low flow channel, which it's anything but when water flows are high. One would have thought that's all kind of part of this one and the same project. And so, having that revelation dropped on us, you have an orphan levy about a mile, a little more, that is kind of outside the scope of FERC. And Oroville, here you are, and you're responsible for that. And now maybe contractually we are, but ethically, I kind of feel like there's some larger scope responsibility to that. And so providing this ability here for me to circle back and ask you a question, just as you review a lot of other projects, is that something that's kind of typical, where there's bits and pieces of a project that kind of left outside the scope? And my other request here, just generally to the commission, is that I would like to certainly that concern, the concern of the low flow channel and our orphan levy, to kind of remain inside the conversation loop, moving forward. Additionally, I'd like to see the city work more closely with DWR, especially as DWR has purchased all the land on the north side of the river, adjacent or across from that levee, and with all environmental work that's going on for the spawning beds for the fish. There's just a ton of things going on that are very important, and I think of value to our community. But back to the orphan levy, just as kind of a holistic kind of 30,000-foot look. Kind of, and without going back 55, 60 years, how that occurred. But, certainly it was, I thought I was being duped. I thought, are you kidding? How'd that happen? It was just from a public standpoint, outsider looking in, I was shocked at that. And it was very concerning. And I think from a citizen's standpoint, outside looking in, that was kind of a big concern. So I don't know, maybe just again, from your perspective, is that kind of happens from time to time, and maybe you have some opinion on that. Thank you.
I would just say, Vice Mayor, these are all good questions. One, just an observation that often flood systems can be fragmented in terms of ownership and responsibility, which is why I think yet another reason why this commission is really important, to connect those pieces and provide an opportunity for the public to interact and understand that, and provide us an opportunity to, work more intensely together to identify those elements. One, I was going to ask Chris Fritz to mention it. We're going to get a little update from the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, but the Natural Resources Agency and DWR did submit a letter to the Corps asking them to support a feasibility study for this levee. There are certain things that need to happen that require a federal partnership for the state to do more things to integrate this levee into our broader system. And maybe Chris can touch on that. And, we can agendize a fuller discussion on that topic.
Great, I really appreciate that. And I do want to thank Supervisor Connolly and Mr. Bateman for keeping that kind of front and center. Again, I'm a big believer in the project, and I want to be as positive as possible. Partly, as Chamber of Commerce, it's my job to sell Oroville and to enhance tourism and all of that. And in order for that to work, the public has to have that peace of mind. The community has to have that peace of mind. And so that's why this thing got like big time on my radar. It's like, whoa, here's something that really did genuinely get missed. And so I do appreciate that. Thank you.
So maybe, Tara, what we can do is make sure the commissioners have a copy of this letter that was submitted to the Corps, and then we can also put it on the commission's website.
Thank you.
Sorry to be speaking fast, but we've got a couple of presentations yet, and I know this audit is an important topic, so I wanted to send it over to Supervisor Kimmelshoe.
Yeah, real quick, Director Nemeth, this is directed to you. So now that we've got this audit, where does it go from here?
Sure. So this is an audit that is conducted every 5 years, and maybe I'll turn it over to Dave to just briefly describe our process for incorporating the improvements and the work we would need to plan for and accomplish by the time we go through this process again. And certainly that would include some updates to this commission as well. But Mr. Sarkeesian, do I have it right there?
You have it right. We submitted a plan and schedule to FERC outlining, how we're going to complete each recommendation, and we're working on them. And every year in December, I'll submit an update to our dam safety program document to FERC and also chronicle what we've accomplished. And so the goal is over the next 5 years, accomplish all of the ODSP recommendations.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Director Nemeth and Supervisor Altside mentioned the audit identified one area that was where it looked like we weren't following the FERC expectations. And so that was one we jumped on quickly. And right after in this role, we sent a letter out as FERC expected to all our staff saying, talking about the importance of dam safety. So as we develop that plan, we're jumping on items there where we need to have some adjustments, jumping on those right away.
Thank you. Any other questions about the audit? Okay, seeing none, let's move to Ms. Sharon Tapia. And we want to talk a little bit about the role of the Division of Safety of Dams. Ms. Tapia manages the department's oversight role for 1,200 dams throughout the state. Those don't include federal dams, but certainly include the State Water Project, but also many, many others. So Ms. Tapia, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. It is my pleasure to share with you today an overview of our California Dam Safety Program and DSOD's oversight of the Oroville Dam. Our mission of the program is to reduce life loss and property damage from an uncontrolled release of water resulting from the failure of a dam or its appurtenant structure, such as an outlet, spillway, or saddle dams. Next slide. While the department is both a dam regulator and a dam owner, organizationally, these two main functions are independently managed by separate deputy directors, as you can see on the simplified org chart. DSOD independently regulates department-owned dams in the same manner as any other state-regulated dam. In the earlier presentation, the independent boards were already discussed, so I'll skip that on this slide. I did want to note, though, hydropower dams owned by the department are duly regulated, as you all are probably aware of, in that they are regulated by both DSOD and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, known as FERC. Next slide. So in response to a catastrophic failure of the St. Francis Dam that occurred on March 12, 1928, the California Dam Safety Program was created in August of 1929 to regulate dams with respect to dam safety. So this month, our program turns 95 years old. This is a view of what our program looks like. We have one of the largest dam safety programs in the nation with a current staff of 93 full-time employees. Our budget last year was almost $28 million, and this budget primarily funds our positions. We do not fund projects for dam owners, nor do we make decisions on the need for the construction of new dams or dams to be removed. Owners are given the option to either repair their dams to meet current standards, alter their dams to lessen jurisdictional size, or to remove their dams from jurisdiction. So our program is led by a team of expert engineers and engineering geologists. We have 2 new branches that are noted in red that have been added in the recent years, an enforcement branch and a reevaluation engineering branch. And I'll be going into that a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide, please. Our statutory authority is contained within the Water Code and also through the California Code of Regulations. The chart on the right shows the criteria for a jurisdictional size dam, which is primarily based on the height of the dam and its storage capacity. So typically dams 25 feet more in height with a storage capacity of 50 acre-feet or more are under our jurisdiction. We are currently regulating 1,234 dams, and we have a varying inventory of dams with 200 dams that are over 100 feet high. And obviously Oroville is the tallest at 770 feet high, which stores up to now, we know, 3.4 million acre-feet of water. Next slide. So like many dams across the nation, the age of our dams in California is now about 70 years old. We do have aging infrastructure. Many of these dams were built before the modern era of dam design and earthquake engineering. These dams are owned by a variety of owners, ranging from private citizens to the state of California, like the department. We regulate 19 dams owned by the department. And dams are classified by their downstream hazard potential, which is based solely on downstream impacts to life and property should a dam fail with a full reservoir. And this hazard classification is not related to the actual condition of the dam. And so what these charts show here, they're color-coded by the hazard classification of dams. And we use FEMA's hazard categories. And there's 3: low, significant, and high. But in 2017, we changed the water code for us to also include a 4th category of extremely high hazard dams. And that's really to be able to separate dams like the Oroville Dam, the ones that if they had a sudden release of water would impact 1,000 people or more, and you could potentially have extensive life loss. Next slide, please. Many of California dams are located in or upstream of densely populated urban areas. And as you can see from this chart of California, this shows some of the major faults and fault zones. They are located near active faults. Next slide, please. DSOD conducts independent reviews on proposed new dams and any enlargement, alteration, repair, or removal of an existing dam. So anytime we receive anything, such as anytime the State Water Project is doing any work on Oroville Dam, they submit their reports to us. They also have to submit an application if they're going to do any modifications, and we do a complete independent review of the work that's being proposed. We also conduct reevaluation studies of existing dams, which may involve a focus review, such as a seismic stability analysis or an updated hydrology analysis. Next slide, please. DSOD engineers and our engineering geologists play a key role in the oversight of construction projects. Inspections are conducted to ensure the projects are being built in accordance with plans and specifications approved by DSOD. Next slide. DSOD also has regulatory authority to supervise the maintenance and operation of dams, insofar as necessary to safeguard life and property from dam failure or an uncontrolled release of the reservoir. We inspect all of our dams annually, except the low hazard dams, which are mandated to be inspected at least once every 2 fiscal years. In addition, dam owners must also fully operate their critical control features on their outlet systems and spillways every year, and in our DSOD presence every 3 years. Next slide, please. DSOD is also prepared to respond to dam safety incidences and emergencies. For a large-scale emergency, such as if California would have a major earthquake, DSOD would immediately stand up an emergency operations center and deploy multiple teams to dam sites. Next slide. So we have expanded our program to bolster dam safety. We have now incorporated risk-informed decision-making, and that was recommended by a technical advisory panel. And we have also implemented a civil administrative enforcement program that was authorized back in 2017 through Senate Bill 92. Our risk program will be focused on the more than 700 dams classified as high and extremely high hazard in our inventory. We are developing the program as appropriate for us being a large regulatory agency, and we plan to move from the pilot program that we've been doing over the last couple years into the formal program next year. We will be using risk-informed decision-making to inform and prioritize our reevaluation efforts of the dams of highest hazard that have potential deficiencies that have a higher likelihood of leading to failures that can impact downstream life and property. Additionally, we have our enforcement program underway. Non-compliant dam owners are now being issued notice of violations, and they may be issued administrative complaints if they take no action when they receive their notice of violation. Owners will also have an option for an administrative hearing process to be sure they have due process. And last slide, please. In closing, as a leader in dam safety, DSOD continues its ongoing efforts to collaborate with federal dam safety agencies, industry, and academia, and to be affiliated with national dam safety organizations for the purpose of advancing dam safety for the benefit of California. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. Just a little time check for folks. It looks like we are going to run over, and we do want to provide some opportunity for public comments at the close of the presentations. So for those of you who can stay past noon, please do, and we'll do everything we can to move along at a good clip, but provide opportunities certainly for the public to comment or ask questions. Do we have any questions from the commissioners for Ms. Tapia? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Sharon. And now I'd like to invite Chris Fritz from the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency to give us a brief update on some inundation mapping. And Chris is going to come back at our next meeting and describe the effort in much more detail. So this is meant to be a bit of a light touch before we get into a more detailed discussion. So Chris, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Director. Hello, Commissioners. Can everybody hear me okay? Oh.
Chris, I think we were getting some sort of echo or tunnel-like audio.
Okay, maybe I'll lean a little closer to the microphone. Are you able to hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Chris Fritz with Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency. I'm here today to provide an update, an overview, actually, of the results of the inundation mapping effort that we completed for the southern part of the city of Oroville. And I guess before I start, since the topic of the Oroville levee did come up earlier, I did want to acknowledge that we did submit an application or a proposal to the Corps for conducting 100% federally funded feasibility study. And I did want to thank both DWR and CNRA for the support that you mentioned earlier in helping to provide that letter of support as part of that application. So we haven't heard anything back yet on whether or not that application is going to be successful, but we are hopeful and anticipating to hear some news here soon. So with that, is my microphone still coming through okay? All right. So with that, I have just about 6 slides here. I know we're getting close to lunch, so I'll try to power through them relatively quickly. Before I dove right into the results of the mapping effort, though, I did want to provide a little bit of background on the study itself. So the study we conducted essentially focuses on those high flow releases coming out of Oroville Dam. So those high flow scenarios down through the river system, and we focused on looking at the potential flood risk posed to the southern part of the city of Oroville. So the area there that you can see on this slide shown in red, basically downstream of the dam, that sits south and east of the river. This effort was an outgrowth of the discussions that were had here in this commission, and it was funded via a grant from DWR to Sabufka, and Sabufka contracted with RNF Engineering to conduct the analysis and prepare the findings. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to dive into the technical work as part of this briefing, but I did want to note that in addition to the river channel modeling that was conducted, we also conducted some interior drainage analyses as part of this work. And this just provides an overview of that watershed with the subbasins here delineated specific to this area for the southern part of the city. The figure there on the right basically gives you an overview of the topography. That's the shaded LiDAR, so you can get a relative sense of how water flows down off the foothills through the urban area and then eventually out into the river. Next slide, please. So this just gives you an overview of that interior drainage system. It is a gravity system composed of storm drains, culverts, and open ditches, and wanted to particularly highlight how this drainage system functions, particularly at the points where it flows under the Highway 70 embankment. So you can see here, this is an example of one of the box culverts where that gravity system flows under and through the highway. And this is important because as river levels rise during those instances where you have high flow releases, water will impound against the highway and it'll actually back up into the interior drainage system. So if you have that instance where you have these high flows in combination with a local rainfall event, the local rainfall essentially, has nowhere to go once you reach kind of that point. Next slide, please. Another key finding, in addition to the mapping that we did for looking at the high flow releases and localized rainfall, we did identify another potential risk due to seepage flowing under that Highway 70 embankment and through. So as water is impounded against that Highway 70, and this was something that was observed back in 1997 during that historic event, there is that potential for areas adjacent to that embankment for inundation to impact. Next slide, please. This slide shows an overview of kind of those two scenarios that we wanted to highlight. The slide there or figure there on the left, that shows a flow of about 60,000 CFS in the main channel. And you can see the instance where water is just beginning to back up into that interior drainage network. And as rivers continue to rise, or as the flows continue to increase, that water backs up further and further back into the system and eventually begins to impact local properties. And in 2017, there were actually observed instances of salmon even making their way up into the urban areas of the city. So you could imagine as they came out of the shopping center there at Grocery Outlet and saw salmon swimming in some of those drainage ditches there adjacent to the parking lot. The figure there on the right is intended to just give you an overview of that instance of where you have about 130,000 coming down the river system. And this is the point where it just starts to impound against that Highway 70 embankment. And as we know, this area is a relic of the hydraulic mining era. The substrate's very porous, cobble. So once water reaches that stage, Highway 70 was just never designed or intended, to be designed as a levee. So you can see there the potential impact for it to inundate areas and businesses adjacent to Highway 70. Next slide, please. All right, I know I've gone fast and this is my last slide, but this basically shows the final results of the mapping exercise we conducted. The figure on the left shows the 1997 historic event, and we did do quite a bit of effort as part of this modeling update to understand and better understand the 97 event. And as we actually developed these maps, we did it in coordination with local stakeholders. And I want to thank everybody who spent time to share their experiences and knowledge of what happened in 97, because we did have some back and forth and we did have quite a bit of updates that we incorporated into the model as part of that outreach effort. And it did give us some confidence in the results. And it was, as we all know, an invaluable exercise to kind of truth check sometimes the model results for these other simulations that were ran. The figure there on the right shows the example of an outflow of 200,000 coming out of the dam, so a little bit greater than a 200-year event, combined with a 100-year localized rainfall event. So you can see the significant extents of inundation there, and some areas being inundated greater than 5 feet. In the end, we basically finished with sort of 4 key recommendations that came out of this mapping effort. First one, and Mayor Pittman kind of touched on this a little bit earlier in the meeting, but first big one is the need for completing a master drainage study and development of a master drainage plan for this area. To our knowledge, this is something that hasn't been done yet, but is a logical next step for looking at alternatives to help alleviate some of the potential flood risk that you see due to this scenario. Second, we identified the need for some further hydrogeologic analysis. So some work to better understand that linkage for the seepage-induced flooding in some of those areas that it could potentially impact. And that's something that could be rolled into the master drainage study effort. Third, the study identified the need to coordinate as best as possible high flow releases with forecasted rainfall events. So because of the understanding that we have now, and because of the fact that these localized rainfall events are typically very flashy in nature, you know, the flows in the interior drainage system peak and recede in a matter of hours, there could be potential to look at coordinating some of this knowledge with a lot of the great work that folks have been doing for the forecast informed reservoir operations, and potentially incorporate some of it into the water control manual update that's ongoing right now. The good thing with these types of flood events is you know, you can oftentimes see them coming, and we are getting better and better at forecasting when they occur. And so that knowledge and being able to coordinate, you know, some of those efforts was another key thing that we identified. Lastly, just utilizing and sharing this knowledge and information with emergency response providers so that it can help them in preparing the emergency evacuation plans. This, as we all know, is invaluable, and in particular due to the impacts that it could potentially cause to Highway 70. They're running through the south part of the city, which is a major evacuation route, not only for, you know, the city, but for the entire region. And next slide. So I know I ran through it very quickly. I want to, at this point, just turn it back over to you, Director, and see if any of the commissioners have any comments or questions.
Sure, let's, again, we are going to go a little bit over. We still need to do public comment, but let's turn it over to Supervisor Connolly.
I would like to thank you for doing this and getting it done. It came about because the mayor and myself were looking at the maps and thinking they're not accurate. They showed 200,000 cubic feet per second and showed Highway 70 as an actual levee. And so that was a big hole in the assumptions made. And then it shows that our local input is important. They did listen to us. And it is really for the safety of the evacuation. This is 200,000 cubic feet could be a normal release and an emergency for the dam, but we want to know who we need to evacuate and how we can do it in an orderly manner. So I think this is a good thing what happened here. And I'm sure Dave has even more relevant comment.
Thank you, Mayor Pittman.
Yeah, thank you, Director. And Bill, thanks for your comments. And Chris Fitz, thanks for your great work done. I really feel confident in that map because as a participant in the 97 event, it happens, many of us had pictures to share and actual visuals to, you know, make the point hard. The one thing I wanted to stress here for the water control process of coming out of the Oroville Dam, it's not just the flow that's coming down the stream, but how long the duration is going to be. Because the duration, even though around 80,000 CFS, was a long period of time at one other event. And the problem is our water table started to rise in downtown businesses on Montgomery Street, which most of those are operating on the second floor. The first floor years ago in the earlier floods, they gave up and said, we're tired of digging out the street. We'll just call her quits and move the first floor up to the second floor and call that first floor. If you go into the Eagles building, go down the basement, it's a storefront. So that's the thing that also has a factor into is how long the high water is going to be there so we can prepare those basement pumps to get going and work on that little particular issue. So it goes back to a controlling point of knowing the flow and how long it's going to last. And there's more work to be done. I appreciate everyone's effort and basically the contributions here. And I think this examples how downstream what we need to look at and have in the eventual plan. Whenever the spillway is being used, I also want to compliment DWR. We're getting a great amount of communication from DWR when those events come about, and it helps us all downstream. And I know we get those directly, and that's a big help. We didn't get those before in the past. So compliments to DWR, and then compliments to the staff putting this thing together. It all goes from us all the way downriver to the rest of the folks that are affected by the flows. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions or comments for Chris? And remember, he's coming back at our next meeting.
Yeah.
Well, on that note,
did you know that, Chris?
well,
I hope so.
well, we can. We're always happy to come back. We did want to provide, just because we had these results available, kind of the overview of the study. So I think if there are any questions on or regarding the technical work that went into it, we're happy to meet individually. But as far as, big picture findings for coming back for next meeting, I think what we have shared here today is what we've got and what, we ultimately would have then too. But we're always happy to come back and share more if requested.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Chris right now? Thank you for offering to meet with folks. Okay, so Tara, we could go to our next slide very quickly. As you all know, our tradition is to look at the topics on our action item tracker. We are also tracking, in addition to some of the inundation mapping by Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, we're also, as I mentioned earlier, tracking a presentation from the Corps on the water control manual of very intense interest by commissioners and the public alike. So if you have something, you have some feedback on our next agenda, we are looking for that by the end of this month. And then I think out of time sensitivity, let's move right into public comments. So if you would like to make a comment, please click the raise hand button, and then I will call on you in the order in which you raised your hand on the Zoom platform. You can also provide comments through the Q&A function on your taskbar. Each person will have 3 minutes to provide a comment. After we have heard from all individual commenters, our meeting planner will read out any comments submitted through the Q&A function to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to share at least once. If you want to make a second comment, we can do so, but not until we've really gone through all the unique commenters. So with that, let's go ahead and open it for public comment. Tara, are you able to help me see?
Yes, I think
Okay.
our first hand is Matt Mentink. And James, I think you'll unmute Matt.
Yeah, Matt, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
To see you, Mr. Mentink.
Yes. Am I muted?
You're ready. You have the floor.
Great, thank you, Carla. Want to thank all the presenters today for a very excellent presentation and the details that they put into it. Joel, your presentation on the audit of the Owners of Dam Safety Program was extremely well. You need to package that one to share with the other groups. Kind of apologize to you that much time went in and we didn't have that much attendance at our meeting today. But the people that do attend are very committed to the process. Attendance in itself may become a problem when we don't able to reach forums and have these meetings. So I know the charter talks about lack of absence may require removal, and that commissioners don't necessarily need to be the city or county supervisors that already have a very busy schedule on their plate. So something to look at going forward. Same with Miss Tapia. Your presentation was most informative of a department that we were not that familiar with in the past. Since a lot of your stuff isn't available, at least I haven't been able to find a lot of it, like your inspections and stuff, on a public website to review, and maybe that's something I could follow up on in a follow-up question. Dave, your presentation is always good. It's encouraging. I think one opportunity would be to sort of lead your presentation, which are all based on the 2020 FERC Part 12 recommendations, by what were the findings within those FERC recommendations of existing conditions that have prompted most of these studies. Like in recommendation R3, it talks about the need to install a bulkhead on one of the gates. Which bulkhead gate is that, and where is that in relationship to the piezometers? Same with R3E, that talks about the existing cracks in the structures and available strength data of the structure and foundation. Where are the existing cracks in relationship to the studies that you're presenting to us? Where's monolith 31? And what were the findings of that study? Those are just a few of the ones. I think we have bench accumulated settlement plots that occur at elevations of 815 feet. That would put all your studies into better contents and sharpen our eyes when we look at those graphs, because on the graphs that you showed, blue was reacting to spillway releases, gray was reacting to elevation levels, and I think we would walk away with a greater understanding of still existing risks in the need for these in-depth studies that FERC's asking for. One last comment, my time's up, is that the recommendations that came out of Joel's presentation should be added to the action tracking log as DWR responds to those recommendations and conclusions. Anything else, I reserve the right to submit post-meeting questions. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Mentink. And we will include the department's response to the audit in our action tracker. Other public comments?
I'm not seeing any other hands or questions in the Q&A at this point.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending today, and our next Citizens Advisory Commission meeting is scheduled for Friday, December 6th, 10 a.m. to noon. It will be a Zoom gathering, and you can check the commission website for further details. As is traditional, when we're heading into the winter season, it will be heavy flood safety focused, but we will endeavor to have a publicized agenda well in advance of that meeting. And maybe I'll close where we began, which is just with gratitude for everyone who's keeping these communities safe, particularly as we move through wildfire season. And just a big thank you. And thank you for joining us. And we are now adjourned.